Are you leading a life of success or are you leading a life of significance? My guest today, Jenn Drummond, will talk to you and share with you how to lead a life of significance. But more importantly, she'll talk about her journey. And it is amazing. She is a mother of 7 who's also summited 7 summits on 7 different continents, including all 7 of the second highest summits on all 7 continents. And while that may sound kind of odd, like why would you summit the second highest summit? She's also done Everest and some others as well, but she'll explain why it's so much more challenging doing the second highest summit, because you have to do it almost alone. In addition, later in the podcast, she is going to talk about this revelation, this epiphany she had, which is really brushing your teeth and what you think about while you're brushing your teeth. And I'm going to let her explain. I don't want to steal her thunder, but I've got to tell you, it has me thinking. And I can tell you tonight when I brush my teeth, I'm going to be thinking about what she talked about because it's life-changing. It could literally change your life. Enjoy. Jenn Drummond is a successful business owner, world record holder, and the first woman to climb the second highest summits on each of the 7 continents. And we're going to talk about why that is so monumental. That sounds a little bit strange, the second highest, but when I read her book, it all came to light for me and why that is so challenging. She now spends her time helping others, inspiring others to create thriving businesses and a lasting legacy of her own and her clients' own legacy. She shares her story and strategies for success through her book, Breakproof: 7 Strategies to Build Resilience and Achieve Your Life Goals. And her Seek Your Summit podcast, programs, and signature talks all help other people grow and learn and be more successful and mainly live a life of significance. So without further ado, Jenn, welcome to the ThriveMore podcast.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here today.
Yeah, the listeners don't know this, but we were scheduled, and then there were some conflicts, and then we had to reschedule. And so I read your book here. I'm holding it up in front for those on watching on YouTube. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple, I'm holding up her book, and it is this great picture of Jenn, on top of a mountain or a rock there. And I didn't know what I was getting into when I started that book. I really didn't quite understand the premise of the second summits and the whole, what you've accomplished. So before we get into that, which is so cool, this really all stemmed, and this journey of yours to summit these peaks, to accomplish what you have, according to your book, this all stemmed from a really traumatic life event back in 2018 when you were in a pretty serious car accident. Can you start us there just to bring the listeners up to speed?
Definitely. Yeah, I'm going to bring you a few steps before. So
Sure.
I was in the business world, had hired myself out of a job, was a stay-at-home mom to 7 children, which was like what I was told that was the dream. Like you had arrived. And I remember being in that role for a while and being fulfilled. And then everybody went to school. And I was like, man, I don't really love this. Like, I want to do more, but I didn't know how. And I felt guilty and shame and all that kind of stuff. And I only preface that because this car accident happened. I'm alive. And I truly believe it happened for me, not to me, because it woke me up and realized like the tape I was playing wasn't my only option, right? It made me realize I don't get to choose when I die. But I sure get to choose how I live. And the way that I'm choosing to live, if it doesn't feel authentic, I have the power to change that. And so I just remember coming home from the hospital and I walked in my front door and I heard kids screaming and there's pizza on the counter and rollerblades inside, like all the things that would normally send me through the roof. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so glad I'm here. Like, I love my mess. I love this crazy. Like, this is so magic. And it really like made me think, like, why was I saved? What am I here to do? And the reason why it hit so significant over these next few months is because I got a call from the police station and they said that they rebuilt the accident 50 different times, could not build a scenario where I lived.
Wow.
And about 2 weeks after the accident, a girlfriend of mine was running on a trail It was wet. She slipped, she hit her head, and she never came home. So here I am, like metabolizing this horrific car crash that should have killed me. They can't find a scenario how it didn't. And then one of my best friends dies doing something that we're all encouraged to do every single day. Like it just,
Yeah.
I couldn't make sense of it. And the only way that I could process was I need to live this life. And I need to understand that whatever's inside of me that gets me excited is in me for a reason. And I'm the only person that can bring it to life.
Yeah.
So what do I want to do? And I had no idea. Like I was lost raising kids,
Yeah.
right? I don't know if those of you are listening, but we get lost into our roles and we kind of forget ourselves sometimes along the way. That I like went out to dinner for like the month of January and started being, oh, you know what? I really don't love pizza. Like I eat pizza because that's what my kids like. But
Sure.
if I had a choice, I actually want to go to this restaurant or that restaurant where before I'd be like, whatever's easy. Like I'm okay.
Yeah.
And I started to really lean into things that I liked. I started to discover things I liked. I made this bucket list that was ridiculous. That was, okay, I'm alive. What do I want to do? I want to taste pasta in Italy. I want to swim in the Great Barrier Reef. Like everything was possible. It didn't matter how crazy it sounded. And this list kept growing. It's still growing till this day, just to let you all know.
Yeah.
But on the list, there was a thing called climb a mountain. And I realized that in 2020, I was turning 40. So I thought, you know, I'm going to do something significant for my 40th birthday. And so when I was looking through all the things I had jotted down that I wanted to do, that climb a mountain stood out. And I'm like, oh, I'm only going to get older. So it's only going to get harder. So this is probably something I should do earlier. And so I live in Park City, Utah, which I'm blessed to be by mountains all the time. And there's a ton of mountaineers here. And I remember asking friends that were into climbing, hey, if you could climb one mountain in the whole world, what would you climb? And they came back and said, hey, I'd climb Ama de Blanc. I'm like, Ama de Blanc? I'm like, what is that? They're like, it's a mountain in Nepal. Nepal's gorgeous. And at the time, they told me it was the logo for Paramount Pictures. So every time I go to a movie with my kids, I could say, like, I climbed that mountain. Kind of felt good. So I'm like, okay, I'll train for this mountain named Ama de Blanc. I don't know if you guys remember, but if we go back to the beginning of 2020, it wasn't too long into that year before this thing called COVID happened.
Sure.
And so I'm not training to climb a mountain anywhere. In fact, now I'm back in my role of motherhood full time, being a homeschool teacher on top of it.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, okay, well, this is life right now. And I remember doing homework with one of my sons and he was struggling. I'm like, listen, buddy, we do hard things. You know, that parent pep talk that we have when we need to get our kids motivated. And so my son looks at me and he goes, if we do hard things, why are you climbing a mountain called I'm a Dumb Blonde instead of a real mountain like Mount Everest? And I'm like, I'm a dumb blonde. Ama de Blanc, honey, not I'm a dumb blonde. Who are you telling this to? I was like mortified.
Oh.
I said, finish your homework. We'll look at Everest. So we did. He finished his homework. We look at Everest. He went to bed. And I was still kind of looking at Everest. And I thought, you know what? If this kid thinks Everest is the hardest mountain in the whole world, I'm going to climb it. And I'm going to show him whatever Everest is, we're capable of climbing. So I call a coach. We go through like a little intake and he's like, okay, you used to be an athlete. I can get you ready for Everest. No big deal. He goes, buy this book about becoming an uphill athlete. So I buy this book and it comes in the mail and I'm reading it religiously because I'm going to climb Everest. So I have some work to do.
Yeah.
And in the front of the book, there was a story of a lady who got a Guinness World Record for doing something in the Alps. I'm having a call with my coach and I'm like, I could have done that. I don't know why I thought I could have done that, but for some reason I felt like I could have done that. I'm like, I can suffer and I would be the coolest mom in the whole world if I had a Guinness World Record because this homeschooling thing, I'm not cool. Like this is not working out for us. And my coach kind of laughed. He's like, all right, I'll think of a record for you. Don't worry about it. I'm like, okay, fine. And we went on with our day. And then a few weeks later, this coach calls me back. He's like, Jenn, I have the perfect world record for you. I had forgotten about the conversation. So I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, what is that? He's like, I think you should be the first female to climb the 7-second summits. I don't know what you just said. I'm sorry, what? He's like, yeah, the 7-second summits. I'm like, I don't know what those are. I don't even know what you're talking about. He's like, well, let me tell you. He goes, the 7-second summits are the second highest point on each of the 7 continents. They're actually harder than the first 7. And so if you climbed them, you'd be respected amongst your peers. And he goes, it's only been done by one male. So you'd be the first woman in the world to do this. And he goes, if you think about it, you have 7 continents, 7 mountains, and you have 7 children. So it kind of sounds like a jackpot. And I looked at him, or like on the phone with him, and I'm like, I had this whole body yes. I'm like, yeah, this does sound awesome. It is a jackpot. I should do this. I should probably tell him I haven't slept in a tent before, but we'll figure that out, I'm sure, right? So,
That's awesome.
I mean, it was crazy. It was crazy, but it was one of those like, I'm alive. Like, let's try it. Let's see what happens. And there's the story.
Oh my God, my favorite. I should probably tell him I've never slept in a tent, but we'll figure that out. We'll figure that out.
Details.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
So when you go, and I want you, if you can, and now's as good as any time, because again, I think I told you before we went live here, and even with the listeners in the intro, people don't understand what it means to summit the second highest summit and why the challenges inherently are so much infinitely harder than the highest summit, because well, I don't want to steal your thunder. Kind of explain why that is, and maybe even talk about the tourism aspect of Everest and some of these other larger.
Yeah, so the 7 summits has actually become quite like a common bucket list item for people in the mountaineering world. And for the most part, those climbs are all hikes, right? So you use your feet, you hike, you have support, you have Sherpa, you have all the kind of things along that line. And then you take the second summits, and for the most part, they're technically more difficult. For example, Mount Kenya compared to Kilimanjaro, those are your 2 peaks in Africa. Kilimanjaro's the roof of Africa. It's a hike. I actually just did it in February with 3 of my oldest sons. So I took a 17-year-old, a 15-year-old, and a 14-year-old. We had success. Mount Kenya is a 20-pitch rock climb. So I'm in a harness connected to a rope. I have to be I have climbing shoes on. We're racing the clock because of the sun setting, and it's at the equator, and you still have ice. So we had to put like ice crampons on and like all these different pieces, right?
Yeah.
And so it's funny because every climb that's a second summit is somehow more complex or difficult than the first. I used Mount Everest as a training ground for K2.
Wow.
Like there was a reason why I did Everest first, and that was so I could test my gear, learn how my body did at that altitude, like figure things out, because on K2, you don't have those opportunities to be wrong. You have to be dialed in and correct and have all that figured out.
This segment is sponsored by Rockbox Fitness Franchising. Take control of your destiny and join the boutique fitness revolution with Rockbox Fitness. If you're ready to make a real impact in your community and own your own business that empowers people to achieve their best life, then Rockbox is the opportunity you've been looking for. They provide comprehensive support from site selection, upfit, training, and turnkey marketing, so you can open your studio with confidence and a strong recurring revenue member base. Visit rockboxfitness.com and click on franchise opportunities to learn more about this exciting venture in the fast-growing boutique fitness industry. It's time to turn your passion for fitness and for business into a thriving venture. In your book, 7 Strategies to Build Resilience and Achieve Your Life Goals, you use the climbing as a story and an analogy, and then you apply it to like a life lesson. What I remember also reading is that these like Everest is a whole economy. There's a whole economy of Sherpas and help and base camps and and warm beds and all that, where when you go to the second summit, because it's the second summit, there is no tourism. There is no shop to go get a hot coffee or like it's you and the mountain and whoever came with you. And if you get in trouble, you're pretty much screwed because there's nobody behind you or in front of you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so how different
Yeah.
did that feel summiting a second summit when you didn't have all the ecosystem and people passing you, coming back down, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, it's kind of eerie, right?
Yeah.
So, for example, Mount Logan is the second highest point for North America. So, Denali's the highest. Mount Logan is, I think, landmass, one of the largest mountains in the world. So, you fly there by an airplane, and then the airplane drops you off on this glacier. And there's no trail, there's no sign of life. Like when that airplane left, it's like, I wonder why if this is really such a great idea. And so like it's crazy because they dropped us off with like our skis and our things, and you're not allowed to have Sherpa on Mount Logan. So I had a sled, I had a backpack, and everything we needed was in that sled and backpack for all of us combined. And this is what's crazy. So you get dropped off. There's no houses built. There's no huts built. There's nothing. So we put up our first tent, and then they bring out these like saws. I'm like, why do we have saws? We're like on a glacier. Like, oh, we have to cut out ice bricks from the glacier to build a wall because the winds will pick up so much that it will rip the tent. And if we rip the tent, we're dead because we're not able to warm up.
Yeah.
So we sit there and we start cutting out blocks to build an igloo. And I'm like, if I was 5, this would be fun. It's not fun at my age, but I'm trying to get to my inner 5-year-old right now. So we build this igloo, okay? And then we have to melt some of the ice so that we have water so we can rehydrate our dehydrated food and all this thing. The next day we get up and we load majority of our gear onto these sleds. And again, we're on a glacier. So we have no proof of like, is this ground underneath us safe? We're on skis. So we're doing skiing up the mountain because you can move faster.
Yeah.
And we literally have a ski pole. So those of you, like I take one step and on the ski pole, I'd go to the left of me, to the center of me, and to the right of me and poke that pole into the ground as hard as I could, wanting it to get bounced back to me. And if it got bounced back to me, that means we think the ground is heavy enough to support this next step. And you would take one step and then you go left, center, right, left, center, right, left, center, right. Every single time you wanted to take a single step forward. And then you would have this path because you'd see where your skis and your sled went. And every so many feet, we'd put a bamboo stick in that space to say, okay, this spot is safe for us to go. And so now we don't have to test that ground again. And we would go as high as we could until we were tired or something changed. And then we would dig a hole. We would bury all of our stuff. And then we would ski down that exact line because guess what? 3 feet to either side of that line hasn't been tested.
Yeah.
And I had an experience on Everest before where we were hiking up. Everybody's on a rope that's been tested. It was a horrible whiteout. So you just followed the rope. And one of the Sherpas unclicked from the rope, took a few steps to the side to go to the bathroom, fell in a crevasse, and they couldn't rescue him.
Oh my gosh.
Okay. So I know firsthand that you do not veer off the line because you do not know what's 2 to 3 feet on any side of this rope. We get back to like our camp that we built. We defrost water. We make food. We go to bed. The next day, we pack up our camp. We ski in our little line that we made the day before. We ski past our stuff. We set up our tent. We build another igloo. We eat. We go to bed so that the next day we can go back down to get our gear to bring it up. And I mean, you inchworm up this mountain with no other humans, right? So if like you're bringing extra things, because guess what? If the burner doesn't work, you're not melting water. You're not melting water. You're not drinking or eating. You're dead. Like there's so many things that the consequences are you're dead. Like it's just bizarre.
Wow. The 2 steps forward sometimes 2 full steps back to then go 3 steps forward the next day. Like,
Yes.
what is the whole how long is that whole process then to summit that particular peak?
Yeah, so that mountain, we actually failed the first time.
Hmm.
So, like, which is the worst feeling ever. We had terrible weather. It was super cold. We got up to a point, and then National Geographic was actually had a team on the mountain at the same time, and they were ice drilling to test the ice to learn about it. And Parks Canada, so you have to report to the park twice a day to let them know that you're still alive or if you need help. And they called us and they said, "Hey, guess what? There's a horrific storm coming in. You're not going to be able to melt water with how cold it's going to get. We need to take everybody off the mountain and we're shutting the mountain down for the year." I'm like,
Wow.
we've been on this mountain for 2.5 weeks. You're shutting this down and we have to start all the way over next year. Are you kidding me right now? And we did. So they like got us all off the mountain and then we had to go back. The next year, we actually had amazing weather, which weather makes all the difference.
Yep.
And we get up to this point. We're like, okay, we're 2 days from the summit. Here's what we're going to do, blah, 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 blah. And then a storm comes in. This mountain, like, I'm like, seriously. We got stuck in this tent for a week in this storm. It was actually 6 days. Finally, it gets light out and the storm gives up at like 6 p.m. at night. And because we're so far north, it's light almost all day long.
Yeah.
I'm like, we need to go down and get food and refuel. Like, because you don't always bring everything up the whole way. You kind of
Sure.
leave it in batches so that you're not exhausted from the weight.
Yeah.
So we go down to get this food and then we come back up. There's 3 of us because 3 of us fit in a 4-man tent. And then you only have to build 1 igloo instead of 2,
Yeah.
right? Little things you do to stay efficient. One of our guys gets frostbite. And so all of a sudden we're like, okay, now we have this problem. We call Parks Canada. They're like, hey, we can't come tomorrow because the weather's bad, but we can come the next day. So we have to wait. They heli evacuate my friend out, as in like drop a long line because the helicopter can't land on the glacier because it won't get up again because
Yeah.
of the altitude. So they drop this long line. We strap him into a screamer suit. They pick him up. And now there's 2 of us to do the rest of this mountain because they won't even pick us up. They're like, you're not an emergency. You have to stay.
Yeah.
And so we're like, okay, I'm 110 pounds, right? The guy that got picked up was 200. The amount of weight that he could carry and help us is significantly more than the amount of weight that I can carry and help us. And so like when we actually summited, it ended up taking us like 2.5 weeks. But it was it was hard. And we were acclimatized. So like some of the steps we took the first year, we skipped the second year because we're like, oh, we don't need to, let's go further because
Yeah.
we also knew where we were going.
Yeah.
When you know where you're going, it's a little bit easier to be like, oh, we were here last year. Here's what we did.
Yeah. Would you say that was probably because I was going to ask you, what was the toughest summit that you did? And would you say that one was?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
would say that one. Mount Logan was physically the most demanding. K2 for me was the mentally most demanding just because, National Geographic has said it's the deadliest mountain in the world. And it took me 2 tries. My first try, I had to bury a teammate. So like you're going back into that yucky feeling. And then I would say another challenging one was the one in Antarctica. Because again, that's another one that they drop you off and they say, see you later. And you're an hour and a half away from an airplane. They don't fly helicopters in Antarctica because it's too cold for them to work. So you're an airplane away and it's an hour and a half flight and they have to have perfect weather because there's no runways in Antarctica.
Yeah.
So the only way that the plane can land is if it has a shadow so that it can watch its shadow and get its depth perception. I mean, it just was like getting to these places is insane.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So describe for us, because, you make the analogy and I can't help make the analogy that, when you summit a peak and you're standing at the top, it's very similar to a business challenge that you've worked at and you've planned and you've, put everything you have into and you accomplish something. There's that unbelievable sense of pride and kind of looking over your shoulder like, wow, I did that. I built that. What does it feel like to stand on the top of K2, to stand on the top of Everest, to stand on the top of Mount Logan? Like when you finally get there and you're on the top and you take a breath and you look around, what is that mental feeling that you had?
Yeah. Okay. So you normally know the summit's coming in a couple steps, right?
Yep.
You're like, okay, I'm a few steps from the top. And it's almost like you purposely slow down because, like, oh my gosh, like I didn't think this was going to happen. And now it's here. And I just want to suck every moment out of this. So you slow down for a second and then you take that final step and you take in the deepest breath you can. You're just like, all the air. And when you take that in, everything disappears. There's no mountain, there's no sun, there's no wind, there's no nothing. Like you are just this feeling of awe. Like it
Wow.
is amazing what the human spirit can accomplish.
Yeah.
And then you breathe out. So you're like, and when you breathe out, like the world returns, right? Now there's the sun. I'm a person. This is a mountain. And you only get that like moment of awe for like you just can't live there, right? It's just a place that you touch and you experience, and then you breathe out, and then you just acknowledge the significance of what you just achieved. And honestly, before you go down the mountain, at least for me, it's like I take my soul out of my body and I throw it out into the world. And I say, I can't wait to find you next. Because it's truly in our journeys that we experience the magnitude of life. And you want that journey because that's where you become who you are.
That was beautiful the way you described that. Wow. That was touching. Really, really
Good.
cool.
Yeah. Yay.
So you said it earlier when you were talking, and it's one of my notes here. And I would just love you to speak about it because I think you not only had it in rehab after the hospital accident or after the accident, doing physical rehabilitation in the hospital. You mentioned it in your book, but you said it here. And I can only imagine that on top of these mountains, but you're saying you don't get to choose when you leave this life, but you sure can choose how you live it. To me, that is so massively powerful and empowering for a person to truly embrace that and to live their life that way. How has that changed the way you've lived? And here's I think a more important question for me selfishly, and probably for the listeners. How has that changed the way you've parented and interacted with those that you love?
Yeah. I mean, it changes the game entirely because it's a new game, right? So, for example, I was climbing K2 and we talked briefly about it, how I didn't have success that first
Mhm.
time. And we were training on a nearby mountain. Like there was just signs that things weren't going well. And then all of a sudden on K2, it's such a triangle. Like if you were to draw K2 as a mountain, you draw like the triangle that you drew in kindergarten. You're like, that's a mountain. That's what K2 looks like. And there's not a lot of places to put tents. So when we were going to climb K2, there wasn't enough tents for all of us to climb together in this one section because it was too steep. I actually had just come off of Everest, so I was pretty acclimatized and probably one of the fitter people on the team. So I volunteered to go a day ahead. I'm like, I'll go a day ahead and then we'll be able to meet up and all this kind of stuff. And the team agreed on it. I remember like every morning on K2 in a lot of these big mountains, you hear avalanches.
Mm.
In fact, you hear them so often that they kind of sound like you're in a bowling alley and you become numb to them. And they happen at a certain time of day because it's like the sun hits the mountain at a certain angle and it heats it up and then it like causes everything to slough off. And so we had heard avalanches that morning. And I had that weird feeling. Like, I think sometimes we just have these weird feelings that we tap into. So the avalanche goes off and I'm climbing and I get a call on my radio. And when you're on the mountain, you have 15 minutes to call back to base camp so that everybody knows like you're okay. And so I get a call on the radio. And then like 2 minutes later, I get another call and then a third call and then a fourth call. I'm like, 4 calls within 5 minutes, something is really wrong. Like this,
Yeah.
like it's not an accidental bump that I hit this one again or whatever.
Yeah.
And I remember getting this call and I finally hand the radio over to the porters. The porters are talking Pakistani. I'm focusing as if all of a sudden, if I focus, I can understand what they're saying. and it feels like eternity
Sure.
until they hand me the phone and they hand me this radio, and it's like in broken English, right? Jenn, accident, Rick died, Jordy's hurt, Stefan stuck. I'm like, what? Like, how, what? And like, it takes you a minute to process it. So you're repeating it to yourself.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, Stefan's stuck. Stefan's stuck because if they sent a helicopter to rescue him, the blades would vibrate and cause another avalanche that could potentially bury him. So he has to stay in this spot until it's later in the day for this to be safe to get him. And so I'm sitting here like trying to understand what just happened because it doesn't even seem real. And another team comes up the mountain, and this other team comes up the mountain, and they said, hey, Jenn, our team's going to the top. We're 2 days from the top. Do you want to join our team? Because we have space for you. Like, we're happy to take you because your team's going down. And I remember thinking like, yeah, there's a part of me that like wants to go to the top and never come back and be done with this thing. But
Yeah.
I choose how I live, right? And who am I showing up as and how am I living? And I sat there, I'm like, I can't go with you to the top. Like, I just lost a teammate. Like, I need to go down and take care of my team. And so they're like, okay. So I changed my climbing devices. I climbed down. We bury a human. We help another one that's injured. Like, everybody get off the mountain safely. We pack up camp. We hike the 55 miles out. I mean, like, all the things. I land in LA. I call my nanny and I tell her, like, I'm not ready to come home. Like, I just had a whole bunch of stuff happen. Kids are little truth tellers. Like, if they knew, like, I couldn't be in that energy space and feel good. And she's like, don't worry. The kids aren't home from camp for a couple days. I'm like, okay, fine. So I'm in a hotel room. I'm journaling. I'm decompressing. I'm talking to a therapist. Like, I'm processing everything that's going on to take me from victim to victor. And I'm trying to figure out what my story is that's true, feels authentic, and gives me my power back. And so I come back to home. The next day, my kids fly home from camp. And I remember one of my little guys coming in. He's like, Mom, did you summit? And I looked at him. I said, no, I didn't. But I had success. And he looks at me like, what do you mean? I'm like, hey, who we show up as people is way more important than anything we'll ever achieve. And I'm proud of the person I showed up as. And when you get older in life, you're going to have a choice of people or peaks. And I hope you always put people over peaks because the peaks will always be there. You know, he's young. So he's like, okay, sounds good, Mom. Like, do you go back? I'm like, yeah, I'm going to have to go back. You know, and so for like this next year of my life, I'm saving money, I'm training, I'm like doing all the things, and I'm miserable on one layer, right? Like, I'm like, why did this happen to me? Why do I have to go back? This is horrible. Like, I don't even know. You know, Pakistan's not the easiest country to be a female in, and blah, 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 blah. So anyways, like 1 or 2 weeks before it's time for me to go back, I get a phone call from somebody that I'd met there the year before. And they're like, hey, you coming back this year? Are you climbing? Because I went with a different company to climb.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, I am coming back and I'm going with this company. And they're like, hey, I've been training, but I don't have all the things to do the climb. Would you be able to help me and bring some stuff over? And I'm like, yeah, I can bring stuff over. You can be on our team. Like, we'll figure it out. And so I go back and I climb. And on July 22 of 2022, I become the third American female to stand on top of K2. And 30 minutes later, the first Pakistani female stands on top of her country's prize peak. And the first Muslim female that stands on top of one of these crazy big mountains out there. And I have twin 11-year-old daughters now. And I know how important it is for them to see somebody that looks like them in an environment that causes curiosity because it doesn't just quite fit, right?
Yep.
And when you plant that seed of curiosity, there's so much potential and opportunity that shows up that you can't even begin to quantify.
Yeah.
And so I sit there and I think like, yeah, I'm so glad I have this choice and how I live my life. And when I make decisions that feel true and authentic to me, while in the moment they might feel disappointing, if I allow that story to play out long enough, I'm like so grateful whatever happened the way that it did, because something so much more amazing and magical and crazy always shows up.
Yeah.
And that time was like, I would have never, I mean, what an honor to be a part of that female story
Yeah.
and be a part of that history and creating opportunity. And so, all of us that are listening today, like, we have these things inside of us that we get to bring to this world because it's us, and learning to lean into that and trusting that even though it's not fun and rainbows and butterflies the entire pursuit, it's going to be at some point. Like, those stories all come full circle and they allow you to give so much more. And I think just by doing this whole quest, my kids have learned to, like, listen to their inner compass more than they ever did before. And we've learned how to cheer each other on in pursuits that maybe we don't understand because they're not our pursuit. And learned how, when you have these big goals and you commit to them, you have to have this confidence, like, I'm going to achieve this. Like, the question isn't, I'm going to achieve it. That's going to be done because I said I was going to do it. So now we get to use our life force and our energy of how. How do I do it to make it fun? How do I do it to help others? How do I do it to serve more than just me getting to the top?
Life is crazy. It works in a weird way, because you just said something that I've repeated to several of my colleagues and people who work for me this week. You kept saying the word how. How can I do this? How can I achieve this? How can I serve this? And I've just been noticing in my travels and in my business and work, the people who say how and ask the question how are predisposed to winning. They've already decided they're going to do it. They just don't know
Yes.
how to do it. And they want, guidance on how to do it. The people that say and ask the question, well, why? Why did this happen? And why is this so hard? And why? And I just noticed this dichotomy between the word, I mean, and why is an important question, the word why, to find out more, but I've just, the way people use it in today's society, why is usually they're playing a victim role. How is, no, I'm an empowered role. I'm a victorious, to use your language. I'm just trying to figure out how to get there, and would love your help. It's the people who ask why, and why did this happen, and why is our thing harder than that? And boy, it's once you see it or hear it, you can't unhear it. And it was so funny
Yeah.
that you chose the word
Right. Right.
how
Right.
so
Right.
many
Definitely.
times. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. 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 Our little trigger words. We have to plant our trigger words for ourselves to hold us accountable.
100%. 100%. This segment is sponsored by Beamlight Sauna Franchising. Are you looking to take control of your destiny and own your own business? Do you want a great brand in a rapidly growing market? Well, Beamlight Sauna is a nationwide health and wellness franchise with amazing opportunities in select markets. You can bring the power of infrared sauna and red light therapy to your community while you build a thriving business. Beamlight Sauna offers support that includes site selection, build out, even pre-launch programs and turnkey marketing, so you can open your studio with a large recurring revenue member base. To learn more about business ownership and franchise opportunities in the fast-growing health and wellness space, go to beamlightsauna.com. That's BEEM lightsauna.com, and click on franchise opportunities to learn more. Is there anything that you would want someone who's because you wrote in your book also, like, you helped, and you didn't expect this, but you helped some young girls in Nairobi with some healthcare needs that they had, and that wasn't even something that you were expecting to do, and the impact it had. Are there other things that, again, you talk about the wings of a butterfly and the ripple effect, as you call it? What other positive things? You talked about the Muslim woman being able to summit the mountain. What else have you seen, though, that is that ripple effect of you doing something, allowing others to see, yeah, it can happen for me too? And it can be, outside of climbing. It could be in anyday life.
Yeah. 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 So when I went to climb Everest, like, my fear of climbing Everest wasn't the mountain. My fear was my kids. Like,
Mm.
how was I going to be gone that long? And were they going to be okay? And what was going to happen? And how did this look like? And I got my mom here. I got the nanny here. I had like all their activities on. Everything was dialed to a T. We went on a vacation right before I went, just in case I didn't come home. We had a great
Sure.
memory before I thought of like every angle. And this goes into this how thing. So I go to the kids' school and I talk to the teacher and I say, hey, listen, I'm going to go climb Mount Everest. I have everything covered, but I have a feeling that my kids might just be a little sensitive or a little off because things have shifted at home. And I just want you to know, maybe you could offer them a little bit of grace. And my teacher looked back at me and she's like, well, would you be willing to come in and teach the kids about setting an Everest like goal and doing this kind of campaign thing around this? I'm like, yeah, of course. So all of a sudden, like my problem, I bring to another human, that other human's like acknowledges it, but then has this idea that allows me to like come into the classroom, teach the kids about goal setting, which I do. They color little hikers and they say like, my Everest goal is to like ski a black diamond ski run or to make the travel soccer team or to climb Mount Everest, right? Because I was doing it. And then in the front of the school, we made a huge mountain and we had a little hiker and that was me. And I had a tracking device on me while I climbed Everest. So then they can move that little tracker up and like the little climber up and down the mountain based on what my tracker said. And so then every day, like the school knew where I was on the mountain. And actually at Everest, you have Wi-Fi at base camp. And so at base camp, I could Zoom call into the classrooms and connect with the kids. And I could answer questions like the most famous, where did I poop and what did I eat? Right? Like that's all they cared about. and I could see my kids and my kids would be like, that's my mom, and whatever. And then I summit Everest and I come home and I go see the kids at school. Now I'm the mom that climbed Everest. Yeah. But the gift of that was my kids felt so seen and so loved on by so many people in the community. And they're like, your mom's doing this or that. Like everybody was following along. So it became this big community like pursuit. And they got to feel firsthand what it's like to be loved on by somebody that's not your mom. Because there are kids, we're going to love them, like no matter what. But to be out of that space and look at like how community and neighbor and people show up, just it changed us because it made me realize how significant it is to participate in things that I didn't really think that would matter before, and how significant it is to show up for each other. And guess what? They're not my kids. They're not your kids. They're our kids. Yeah. And so how are we impacting our kids, right? And that was a big game changer for us. And it all came because I was willing to ask for help.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of us view help as like, I love to get it, but I hate to ask for it.
Sure.
And when we learn to ask for it, we create so much more opportunity for everybody.
So you have done a lot. You have summited Everest and the 7 second summits, and you're raising 7 children, which is not an easy feat. I got 2. That's hard enough. What's your next challenge? Like we're recording this in the middle of 2024. What's your next challenge that you can't wait to conquer?
Yeah, I think sometimes we don't talk about this a lot, where when you achieve this great big thing, right? You sell the company, you conquer the goal, you do the Ironman, or you have a thing happen like a divorce or empty nester or whatever else like that it's like you lose that energy and that momentum and that excitement because that thing is gone. And there's actually like this phase of depression. And some of us have a tendency to like just put another thing on the list to achieve or to conquer. And for me, that's my personality. Like I love the feeling of doing something and chasing something and the external accolades and all that kind of stuff. So much so that the harder thing would be for me to do nothing. So I purposely took a year sabbatical. Yeah. Hardest thing I've ever done. I'm like, no joke.
Yeah, and
because like when we're building the business or we're climbing the mountain, like we get a lot of feedback. It's easy to measure. It's easy to see what's working and not working and like do the thing. but you like sacrificed for a period of time. Your life was not balanced. And
Yeah.
my family, like they sacrificed. I mean, I did the best that I could, but I was like, if I don't learn how to put measurable metrics in place for rebalancing my life for this next year with my family, it's going to lose its significance in our lives. So I took the year off and was very intentional about like what I was doing, what was going on. And so now I've been like, now I'm just getting to that year's being done. And I'm speaking on stages and sharing the story. And I'm actually taking people that have had a big exit or had this thing on expedition, like safe expeditions, not Everest, but
Yeah.
like, or I'm taking them in Park City to go on hikes and to unplug and to like really learn how to dance with slow and
Mm,
develop like a different way of doing life, which is a transition that I didn't even realize I needed help with, but I did. And then once I've done it, how many people have reached out to me saying like, "Hey, like would you mind working with me and let's go do this, or can we
yeah.
experience this?" And that just gives them that space to like get comfortable and be intentional about either continuing the break or intentional about the next piece they pick up.
Yep.
Because for those of us that are doers, the being is a thing.
Yep. Yeah. It's the doing is our identity is so wrapped up in the doing. And when you're not doing,
Yes. Yes.
my identity, what's going on here? Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Like I totally
Yeah.
relate.
Yeah.
Couple last questions for you. And these are just kind of fun and interesting. I always love to hear people's answers. So, Jenn, you're living this amazing life. You're doing it. But let's say we fast forward to the end of your full, rich life, and we're at your funeral, and a loved one is reading your eulogy. And so you're looking down from above or from wherever, and they can pick three descriptors to describe your life. It doesn't have to be a phrase. It could just be three independent words, but words that they feel describe Jenn and the impact she left and the life she lived. What three words do you hope that person chooses to describe your life?
Energetic, curious, and kindness.
Hmm, beautiful. Great. There's no right or wrong answer. I
Yeah.
just love to hear how
Energetic
people
might
answer
be
that. And
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, energetic, kind of like enthusiasm.
yeah,
And like the quick story there is when I took the boys to climb Kilimanjaro, they had like perfect gear and all this stuff, and they're carrying 10 pounds and
yeah,
complaining. And then we have these porters and Crocs carrying 40 pounds, like singing songs, ecstatic.
yeah,
And we just really got this lesson on I don't care what you're doing. If you're doing it with enthusiasm, it's a different experience.
yeah.
And how important enthusiasm is in everything that we do. I think curiosity is what drives us forward to make more possible for
Hmm.
everybody that's here. And I've found that being kind to myself actually makes me stronger. I think a lot of us have that self-talk of like, I should have done that, or I could have been better, or whatever else like that. That does gets you nowhere, right? It actually sets you back. But if you learn how to be kind to yourself when you take on these things or try life or figure it out, that gives you so much strength to keep going forward. And I just wish that everybody just like be grateful. Like you showed up, you tried, whatever. Like be kind to yourself and others.
I'm man, that's funny you say that. I'm in a year-long leadership academy program right now, and of course, one of the components of that is a professional coach I have, and I'm realizing because we have to journal and do these exercises and I have to report back all the stuff, and I'm realizing I beat the living hell out of myself. Like, what am I doing? Like, it's not the world. The world's easy. It's up here that's like full on warfare. And it's funny,
Oh my
Jenn, like you're
gosh.
saying that,
Yeah.
and I'm like, has she been reading my journals? Because that's my biggest growth area right now is God, just quit beating myself up so badly and be happy. Just be happy. There's so much more to
I
be
know.
happy for. But
It smacked. Yeah. No, it
Yeah.
smacked me in the face. Like when I learned this lesson a few years ago, and it's like a lesson you keep having to go back to
Yeah,
because
of
I think it's
course.
so ingrained the opposite. But
Yeah.
like I was on the mountain brushing my teeth. There's no mirrors on the mountain. I mean, I
Yeah.
wish there was, but there's not. And
Yeah.
so you brush your teeth and you're just looking out into the world and you're like, oh my gosh, this world is so beautiful. Like what an amazing place. Like how pristine. And you kind of forget about it. Well, then you come home. So I'm home and I'm so happy that I don't have to put shoes on to go outside to brush my teeth, right? Like I walk right into the bathroom and there's a mirror. So I'm brushing my teeth and I'm looking at myself. I'm like, oh, I should have slept longer. Oh my goodness, my eyebrows need to be dyed. Oh my, like I am like picking myself apart. And it only became aware because like 2 days before I didn't have a mirror and my conversation was entirely different.
Yeah.
And I caught myself and I was like, oh my goodness. So I ran upstairs to my kids. Hey, what do you talk about when you brush your teeth? What's this conversation going on in your head, right? And
Yeah.
so we had this like huge thing about your toothbrush talk. Like
Yeah.
when you brush your teeth at our house, we're only allowed to say good things about ourselves and cheer ourselves on for the day and before we go to bed. And like that teeny tiny little thing shifted a lot and it made me realize like how many times I just did that in my life. Like I'll give you one more example.
Yeah.
Everybody in the world has a gratitude journal. I'm like so grateful that you have time to do a gratitude journal, right? I feel guilty that I didn't have time to do one or just that I never got it done. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm ungrateful. Like all the stories you write, right?
Sure.
And one day I'm at this red light by my house. And I hit this red light every time because I'm on the short side of it. And let me tell you, like I get angry.
Yep.
Every time I get angry, I sit there and laugh. I'm like, only I'm angry. The red light doesn't care that it's red.
Oh.
And so finally, one day I'm sitting there and I have this aha moment. I'm like, the red light is going to become my gratitude list. Every single time I hit this red light, I'm just going to say out loud what I'm grateful for. And that's how this gratitude journal that everybody brags about is going to get into my life because that's the only way that I'm going to get it done.
Yeah.
To the point now where like when my kids are in the car, they all know. So we all know like, okay, everybody say something you're grateful for.
Yeah.
When we hit it green, we're like, oh man, we missed our gratitude time.
See, that's great reframing. That's beautiful.
Like, what?
Yeah.
Right. It's crazy.
I love it. Oh, I love it. All right. Second to last question. If I were to give you a magic wand, Jenn, and tonight you could wave that magic wand and change the world one way, it could be the biggest or smallest change, whatever you want it to be, but big material change to the way the world operates and is and exists and humans and all that, but only one way. If you wave that tonight, how is the world different tomorrow when we wake up according to your wish?
Yeah. So my wish would be that everybody lived life through the lens of love. And if we all lived life through the lens of love and operated always from a spot of love, I think everything would change.
In a millisecond. Yep, in a millisecond. Most important question. You are so inspiring and funny and have great stories. And I think most importantly, I just heard nothing but pure authenticity and just genuineness coming from you, which is so refreshing and wonderful. Where can people find you, follow you? I know I got your book off of Amazon. Again, I'm going to hold up to the camera for the YouTube listeners, but it is Breakproof, and it's 7 Strategies to Build Resilience and Achieve Your Goals by Jenn Drummond. We'll put that in the show notes so that you guys can just scroll down and click it to be able to buy it. But where else can they follow you, be part of your journey or connect with you?
Yeah. So everybody that's listening today, if you text the word Everest to the number 33777,
Okay.
you'll get into my network so you can keep up on what's going on. But you'll also get this video, and it's a video of the Milky Way going over Everest Base Camp. And I keep it in my favorites on my phone for whenever like life is getting overwhelming or crazy or whatever. Like I'll zone out and watch this little video, and it just reminds me how like insignificant whatever I'm complaining about right now truly is, and how magical and beautiful our world is. So you'll love the video. It's everybody's favorite. When I give speeches, I give it out as well. So that's text the word Everest to 33777.
Okay.
And then also check out my website, which is jendrummond.com. And you'll get access to everything I'm doing. You'll find your social media platform of choice and reach out, say hi, connect. I'm definitely in the cheerleader phase of life of like, let's make it happen, and would love to connect.
Perfect.
Thank you.
We'll put all that in the show notes to make it easy for the listeners. Thank you so much. I am sitting in a place of gratitude, having spent this 45 minutes with you. So thank you so much for joining today. Thank you for tuning in to the ThriveMore podcast. Don't forget to take a look at the show notes for any of the resources that we mentioned during the podcast. And if you haven't already, be sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on your notifications so you have access to the latest and the greatest. You can connect with me on any of the socials at Real Roger Martin. And be sure to check out our website, ThriveMoreBrands.com. There you'll find information on the brands we support and information on franchising. Thanks again for tuning in.